Chapter 21. The pleasure of falling into a chest. The giant bear covered its aching face with its thick paws and started scratching and clawing. I was very disappointed to have wasted those precious bullets without hitting the vitals, which would have been more trouble. The pain did not cause the giant bear to immediately lunge at me. It puckered its fat ass and arched its head hard into the ground. I wanted to turn back to the rock face and pick up Sarit and head for the top of the valley, but I was afraid that the giant bear would recover and jump on the boulder to attack me from behind. So I had no choice but to crouch helplessly on the boulder, ready to continue to force back the approaching danger with my blinding shots. Carefully observed the movement of the giant bear, clearly listening to his heartbeat. This big guy has not been moving. My heart flashed a trace of joy. Could it be that the giant beast is just so messed up by my gun shot to death, but also feel unlikely? Had to crouch down on the boulder, aiming at it. As long as the giant bear scurrying again, wasting more bullets will have to shoot. Just at the moment when I was a little relaxed, the giant bear suddenly raised its sludge-stained face and with a fierce countenance lunged at me with great speed. I did not fire. It was futile to shoot indiscriminately in such a situation, and the bullets had to be used in the most urgent moments. Drawing my dagger, I kneeled on one knee on the boulder, and as long as it dared to lunge upwards, I would poke it hard in the face. Things have come to this point, can only be desperate, deadly physical combat, although not a little chance of victory for me, only try to take advantage of the advantages of the boulder. With a clang, the huge body of the giant bear hit the boulder with extreme anger. I hastily leaned against the rock wall, but my feet swayed. The boulder swung a few times and touched the rock wall to slow down the force and did not topple over. I broke out in a cold sweat, but I also let go of a sense of worry. The giant bear was nowhere near as high this time as it had been in its first leap, and its balance was much worse. It turned out that one of the eye sockets on its face had turned into a black hole, and I was shocked to realize that the burst of strafing just now had been lucky enough to hit its eye. The giant bear was now half blind and half deaf, and looked a little misplaced in response to my attack. I developed a thought. Since the giant bear was injured so seriously, today is to support until the dark. Also have to eradicate this scourge. The desire to fight boiled in my blood. As long as I could blind it one more time, maybe this big guy would become my food. The thought of the rich fresh meat on its body boosted my courage a lot. The giant bear's body is round and burly. The first half of its body is just crouching on the edge of the boulder. The fat rump fell down and always pounce on the wrong side. More than that, it is grumpy and tried a few times without success. The giant bear had some intelligence left, and instead of insisting on futile methods in a brainwave, it became a matter of holding on to the boulder and rocking it from side to side to try to shake me down. If the boulder fell, I could hold Sarit and continue to climb upwards, but the food in the gully and this hidden threat to our survival was out of control. Even if we escaped, if we slipped and slid down while climbing the rock, we would all be bitten by the giant bear as usual. The boulder was hugged by this behemoth, gradually shaking badly. It actually knew to utilize the principle of resonance to make the boulder collapse, which couldn't help but make me a little afraid of it. The dagger in my hand was a bit short. I didn't dare to approach its mouth rashly. If I really bit it, one of my hands would immediately disappear. My feet are more and more difficult to stand firm. Had to lean more tightly towards the stone wall. The moment the boulder tumbles, able to climb up in time, not to slip. The boulder was finally shaken down by the bear, and just at the moment my body lost its balance, a hand grabbed a crack in the rock wall, and my body hung above it, swinging from side to side like an old-fashioned pendulum. The injured bear had no good balance left, and his body plunged and rolled downward with the impact of the boulder's tumble. There was a rumbling mess as the boulder rolled onto the creek ditch and across the top of the ditch rim, but the giant bear was nowhere to be seen. Fell in. The bear fell in. At some point, Sarit's shout came. I said hastily, "Don't talk. Lie steady on your back." Sarit pressed her soft little face back against the rock wall again. A gibbering agitation emanated from the gully. A large splash came up, and a low roar of tearing resounded dully in the bottom of the gully. I dared not relax my grip on the rock wall for a moment, really afraid of a giant bear or a giant crocodile tearing and jumping out. I could not see the situation of the fight inside, and for safety's sake, I could only judge the situation inside by the sound of the noise. The sun began to redden. The unbearable heat gradually disappeared. About half an hour later, the ditch stopped ringing. The two beasts should be divided into victory and defeat. My arm has been crashed raw pain. Active legs muscles from the 5-meter high rock wall jumped down. Sarit, hold on just a little longer. Having finished shouting at her, I cautiously approached the stream gully, my fear growing. With the boulder down and no natural island of safety left, any further danger would have to be climbed up the large tree that had just been there. The water downstream had turned scarlet, and the 4-meter-long giant crocodile inside the gully must have mistaken the giant bear that rolled in for me and tore at me fiercely. The giant bear did not bite me, but he himself fell a dog gnawing mud and was inexplicably attacked by the giant crocodile, full of anger like a grenade, exploded in the bottom of the ditch. The giant bear's mouth is not as big as the giant crocodile's, but that pair of thick bear paws, never a joke. When I gradually see the situation inside, the two beasts have been tangled together. The giant bear fur is very thick, cannot see any external injuries, while the giant crocodile's spine was slapped by the bear's paw, opened a few cracks. Gurgling out of the blood is always washed away by the stream. The giant bear seemed to be out of breath, biting the tail of the giant crocodile, its body curled up. The two big guys were now both one-eyed. Neither one had much chance of winning. This really made me happy. With this hard-fought contest, I could easily result in the lives of both of them. One thing was now certain. Neither the bear nor the crocodile would be able to climb out of the creek gully again. I retrieved the spear shaft that I had dropped on the ground, and it was time to start the kill. If you poke the giant crocodile first, then the bear will be difficult to deal with. After all, it has a particularly thick hide, and piercing strikes won't work. I stabbed the wound in the giant crocodile's spine with the tip of my spear, like a bug-fighting player flicking a cricket's tentacles with a mouse's beard. The giant crocodile's greenish-black spine was singed with a bloody piece of flesh by my dagger, and pain immediately swept through its entire body, biting down on the bear's front paw and violently flipping its body so that its teeth rotated like gears. The bear roared madly, biting the giant crocodile's tail and shaking it from side to side, trying to swing it up and slam it against the ditch wall, but the small space and the heavy crocodile prevented it from utilizing this fighting style. The furry, fat front paw, alive, was removed a layer of flesh, only white cream, one by one, dripping blood. Giant bear C and giant crocodile biting each other spell teeth actually so lose, furious swing up. Another front paw, fierce whack giant crocodile spine. Think about that only can put the boulder. Easy to shoot away the bear paw. At the moment with extreme anger swing in the giant crocodile's spine, and there are cracks in the spine. Any poplar bark like scales again how strong, but also can not withstand. The bear's claws were sharp, not just the gravity of the swat. The tips of the claws scratched and dug and lifted from the crocodile's back, and the cracked scales instantly turned into a pile of rotting flesh, glancing across the road like a chipmunk cat scratching at tender poplar bark. I think the giant crocodile should be dead now. The spine must be seriously broken. I do not know how many broken ribs. At this time, the other 2.5 meters long crocodile also pounced over, biting the giant bear's hind legs. It seems that the animals still have a solidarity with the alien. That kind of natural desire for fresh meat to tear and bite cannot be suppressed. Due to the narrowness of the creek gorge, the giant bear was unable to turn his head for a moment to respond to the attack behind him. It could only stomp and kick hard, trying to shake off the sudden pain. But in doing so, the 2 pieces of skin and flesh on the back legs were torn off. Again, and it seemed to be wailing in pain and regurgitation, with the stream still rushing through the brutal and bloody pit. I stabbed the 2 predators, attacking the giant bear's hind legs with the tips of my spears, piercing 1 eyeball each. The intense pain of eye destruction caused the 2 predators to launch another ferocious attack on the giant bear. From the white dripping blood, no skin and flesh of the giant bear's hind legs, hissing and biting off large chunks of meat. The bear only grunted and wailed, but no brute force to resist. The opportunity is not to be lost. I quickly look for the bear's other eye, which is extremely small. The slender bare hair is already wet. Covering the eye socket is even more difficult to find. I looked at the black eye socket that was hit by the bullet and exploded with ooze, estimated the approximate symmetrical position, and stabbed down with all my strength. Another stream of blood burst out with black pulp and rolled down into the turbulent stream. The giant bear violently body began to spasm. Struggling movement is not as exaggerated as I thought. Although the giant bear had already reached a half-dead state, I was still uneasy and poked the 2 predators with the tip of my spear to stab the wounds again so that it would continue to tear the flesh of the giant bear's hind legs. The bones of the giant crocodile's entire body appeared to be completely shattered, and it surprisingly didn't move at all when I poked its other eye, so I thought it must have already snapped. I poked the 2 black eye sockets of the giant bear a few more times and realized that it was just twitching, knowing that it was the muscles and nerves reacting without any resistance, which made me relaxed about the giant bear. Now it was the turn of the 2 injured predators behind the giant bear. I easily poked the eyeballs of both of them because they were very badly injured and had already lost a lot of blood, coupled with the fact that they had just expended their physical strength to tear up the giant bear. They were now like geckos that had just been sprayed by a gunman and were only left with the ability to feel pain. I started poking and prodding them in the eyes in turn. Even though some were already dead, I was still sensitive to swindling death. Once on the battlefield, I used the deception of swindling death to slaughter 2 enemies who were rummaging through dead bodies for their belongings. I lifted another 100-pound boulder and smashed it very hard on the skulls of the crocodiles and bears, and was completely relieved when I heard the creaking sound of bones breaking. Ran Sarit's below and saw that she was lying on her back on a high rock wall and looking at me for a long time. I smiled and said, "Here, now jump down." Sarit looked down and said, "I'm scared." I told her I would be able to catch her accurately, and she hesitated for a moment, then finally closed her eyes and leaned back down, plopping into the crook of my open arms, causing her to yelp out in shock. I held her tightly in my arms, rubbing my lips over the top of her soft head, making a point of comforting her. Chapter 22. Through the rainforest. Sarit hugged me hard, and I thought how hard it must have been for her on the rock face. She's a weak woman. It's hard for her to hold on for so long on such a steep slope, and the situation around her is very thrilling. It's going to be dark soon. We need to hurry. Miyu and Po are still waiting for us at the cave. Finished to Sarit. She nodded tenderly and loosened her arm around me. Sarit stood on top of the stream gully, observing the surrounding movements so I could safely descend into the stream gully to slaughter the dead beasts. Being able to bring these fresh beasts back to the cave would be enough food for us for a month, but it was getting late and I couldn't cut the fine meat from them for a while. The fur of the giant bears was a necessity for our life on the island, and it would have to be exploited slowly, trying to keep the bears' skins intact as much as possible. This would delay more time, and it was impossible to bring a ton of beast meat back to the cave at once. For the time being, I could only slaughter the meat of the next half of the predator and leave the rest for tomorrow, in order to prevent other beasts from eating the carcasses of the beasts in the gully. I pressed them down with boulders, so that even if there were other carnivores pecking at night, I wouldn't lose too much. Sarit stood on top, looking around while catching the fine meat I threw up, which could have been 100 pounds. I used the hemp vine to tie up the fat, fresh meat, carried it on my shoulder, took Sarit's hand, and started walking back. Due to spending too much time, Sarit and I had to run back to prevent danger in the woods if we failed to return to the cave before dark. Sarit's small hands were delicate and soft, and were gripped hard by me. I couldn't run fast enough for fear of tugging and hurting her fragrant shoulders, and my right hand had to keep picking off the poisonous snakes that got in my way with the long pole. After running for a while, I realized that Sarit's cheeks were covered with beads of sweat and her feet were getting soft. In order to move fast, I took her into my arms again, kissed her lingeringly, and caressed the sensitive parts of her body. Sarit's body was drenched in sweat, and the already thin cotton cloth was even more diluted and transparent. My fingers kneaded her nipples and tickled her lower body to turn her on as quickly as possible and ease away the fatigue. Her body and organs were more susceptible to sensitivity than the previous times, and my fingers, stimulating her, quickly turned sticky and wet, not knowing if it was sweat or love juices secreted from her lower body. Sarit murmured a lot, her flaccid C***K and warm belly rubbing hard against my arms, and one of my thighs could clearly feel the fuzzy hairs of her privates rustling as they squeezed through the damp cotton of her pants. Sarit's sexual needs began to intensify, and I hastily withdrew my fingers that were constantly stimulating her lower body. Shaking the mesmerized Sarit hard, I asked her, "Are you better? We need to hurry. A little more delay is a little more danger." Sarit's pretty face was shy, and she nodded breathlessly, a sweet smile hanging at the corners of her mouth. I pawed at the fresh meat on my shoulders, letting the muscles in my back relax, and tugged her little hand up again as I continued to run through the woods. In the last moments of the sun's descent into the sea, we saw the cave from a distance. The gate of the cave was still intact, which soothed my pounding heart. When Sarit and I came into the cave, Miyu and Po both ran over to hug me and Sarit. Seeing their beautiful faces with rainy blossoms, I guessed that they had cried for a long time because they were worried about me. Po blinked her big wet eyes, looked at me for half a day, and then suddenly embraced me by the waist, giggling. She was happy to see me come back safely, so she was very happy. Sarit and Miyu both covered the other man's intoxicated little mouth and laughed when they saw Po's naivety. In the evening, we all sat around and ate grilled fish and chips, and Sarit recounted the day's encounters and mentioned the giant bear that was a threat to our lives, which we all were shocked and delighted to hear. I told them to come with me tomorrow to carry those fresh meats back, and Po clapped her hands and jumped around the fire with joy when she heard that she could come out of the cave with me. After dinner, I led Sarit to the stream at the entrance of the cave to wash the sludge from my body. Sarit was drenched in sweat and must have longed to freshen up in the stream before bed. The smell of raw meat still clung to my body, and dried animal blood clotted sporadically on my chest and back. Sarit glanced back at the cave and, seeing that Po and Miyu couldn't see us, volunteered to come over and take my hand and lead the way towards the farther section of the stream. I didn't understand what she meant, but followed her obediently. After about 20 to 30 meters, I stopped Sarit's intention to continue walking. "Don't go too far. The mouth of this stream is very open, and it is easy for fierce beasts to scurry out." Sarit listened to my words, lowered her head, and gave a gentle, "Oh, that kind of girls." Affectionate obedience instantly drove away a lot of fatigue for me. I said, "Hurry up and wash it." Sarit nodded. After saying such a sentence, I suddenly felt guilty. I'm the only man on this island, and I can't even give the girl next to me the security of bathing in the stream at night, but I'm always ordering and urging. The yellow moon hung high in the sky, shedding a soft, even moonlight that shrouded the mountains, the water, the plants, the insects, and the young girl in front of her in a psychedelic haze. Sarit lifted her soft arms and removed her upper cloth shirt. The girl's proudly lifted breasts jumped out and swayed from side to side. Without any expression, she smiled and handed the garment to me, followed by bending down and lifting the girl's white right leg to push down her pants. The white jade back slid from the spine to the neck, arching a beautiful arc. I was attracted out of my mind by her charming torso. She handed over the cloth pants again. A pair of autumnal swaying eyes, looking deep in love, began the girlish bath. Taking Sarit's clothes, I kept looking around. The giant bear is definitely not coming, but I wonder how he and the predators are doing now, if they are being pecked at by other beasts, and at the moment I worry about the food that belongs to us. Holding Sarit's clothes in my hand, I felt an indescribable sensation inside me as Sarit's alabaster arms lifted up the clear, flowing water of the stream, cleansing the maiden's holy flesh. I placed her clothes on a dry rock and took off my own clothes to wash the ebony blood that covered my body. I could not lift the water to scrub, for in the day's struggle many slender cuts had been made on my naked upper body and lower legs, and parts of the flesh were just scarred. I carefully lay down in the stream, letting the water slowly soak and rinse so that the pain all over my body would not be so intense when I cleaned it. I kept my eyes out of the water, looking around, and at Sarit to prevent any danger from suddenly appearing. Sarit had crouched down in the water and reached down with her left hand. I knew she was cleaning the most sensitive, private part of a woman's shyness. Sarit was a little embarrassed to see me looking at her and was busy lowering her head, pretending not to see me. My teeth were gnashing in my mouth, not because the water was cold, but because the scratches around my body were in intense pain. Sarit was very strange about my bathing posture. In order to ease the somewhat awkward atmosphere, she whispered to me, "You really look like a crocodile." I was amused and whispered to her as well, "Hurry up and wash, or I'll come over and bite you." She laughed too, and from the loose pink shoulder, I knew her left hand was still underwater, pinching and washing there. "I'm done washing, now I'll help you." After saying that, she stood up, her two pink and white knees exposed to the water, and tripped over the stream and leaned over. "You be careful, don't slip." I admonished her but didn't reject her. Sarit's knee came close to my nose, and a soft foot stepped on my hand that was pressed in the water. I didn't squeak, though it hurt a little, but she yelped in surprise, thinking she'd hurt me. With the stream rushing past my body, Sarit's beautiful teenage torso looked particularly tantalizing in the moonlight. At the moment she squatted down, a unique female body odor pounced into my nostrils, sweet and chewy. Her soft hand gently touches my spine. I can feel the bulging flesh on her jade hand, with infinite smoothness and full of suction. My body suddenly jerked. Sarit was wise enough to know that he had touched my wound and was busy asking with concern, "Does it hurt?" I shook my head, my eyes continuing to watch ahead. The sound of sobbing reached my ears, and turning my head to look at her, I realized that she was suddenly crying. "Don't feel sorry for me, keep washing." She hummed and did as I asked. I had a couple of large cuts on my body from climbing a tree and getting cut by a dead branch. I jerked a few more times. Hen Sarit's hand inadvertently touched it. "You can kiss me, it'll ease the pain," she choked out. I can't imagine that Sarit is so attentive that even I didn't expect it. "It'll hold, you wash it." I didn't look back at her, only said it sullenly. Sarit, however, didn't continue and stood up, covering her cheeks with her hands and crying. I don't know how she interpreted the words she just said. Maybe it was because she suddenly had no confidence in herself, or more importantly, she was sad that she couldn't help me share the pain. Sarit cried, very aggrieved, so that I felt guilty. I should not be like that to her, should not use a man's strength to rebuff her tenderness. Thinking of her as just a young girl in love, is that I took the initiative a few times on her body, teasing, stirred up the tide of her female love. And at this moment, unexpectedly and unknowingly in the cold, so that she became a man to show the desire of the audience. I hurriedly squatted and stood up, hugging Sarit tightly as I did so. My face was pressed firmly against her soft, smooth belly, grinding and feeling it. Her roundedness gave my palms an infinite amount of flesh so that I could never pinch the hip bones inside. Sarit dropped his hands and wrapped them tightly around my head, squeezing and pressing hard into the small of his back. Finally, my desire sprang to life, the first real burning desire I'd felt since my escape from the snow. My breathing quickly became rapid. My head grew restless on her belly, and my tongue unconsciously came out of my mouth, sucking on the delicate softness of her belly. The sound of my heartbeat grew more and more violent, and the sexual urges consumed my entire brain. No longer satisfied with sucking on her belly, my mouth and nose began to seek out the hairy part of her lower body, my lips rubbing and grinding, my tongue full of tension, drilling and whisking towards the most sensitive buds of her private parts. The faintly sultry odor emanating from the area stimulated me intensely, and my lower body began to swell like a thick eel, rising up in the swift current, trying desperately to leap up and nibble at Sarit's tantalizing torso. Chapter 23. The Tailor's Lover. "I want to give it to you," Sarit murmured under her breath, and I understood what she meant. The words brought back a lot of memories. Since I joined the mercenaries in Thailand at the age of 17, I had slept with a lot of women, and after the monthly devil's training, there were hordes of Southeast Asian women transported in military vehicles for us to vent our internal sexual desires. Most of them were local prostitutes, but there were also refugees who had been trafficked here. The soldiers swarmed over them like vultures on carrion, snatching one and pulling it back to their tents for a quickie. In order to prevent the emergence of sexually transmitted diseases in the ranks, these women were all pre-tested for germs. This was the only fun all the soldiers could have during the boring and horrible training days. Therefore, everyone treasures every such opportunity, and some women's bodies are enjoyed by more than one man at a time, almost simultaneously. They have to endure more than 20 times of sexual intercourse in this one day's time, and stick to it until the next morning. They can get a considerable income, although those money is just enough for them to buy food for a few days. I only made love to one woman inside at a time, and when I did it in the tent, if another male came over to share, I would fight him. Until I was 20 years old, I could only mate once or twice with the women I grabbed, because some men were covering mates, and they wouldn't stop until they had enjoyed every woman's body that was sent to them, all at once. This would clash with me, and once someone grabbed a woman I was holding down, I always fought him pretty hard, and I ended up with bruises all over my body. In the training camp, conflicts between mercenaries could not be resolved with weapons. Both sides had to rely on punches and kicks, and if any of the beaten soldiers reached out and touched a snatch or a dagger in a moment of anger, they would be shot on the spot by the instructor. This kind of fighting was also treated as training. By the time I was 21, I had become tall and strong. I remembered that once, those two guys who loved to take the women under others and provoke me while I was making love to the woman who sent me, and then full of lechery into my tent, I was so angry, I pulled out the penis from the bottom of the woman who pressed and fought with both of them with my naked body. In fact, this was what I had anticipated and planned for a long time, to wipe out 3 years of hatred on the occasion of this repeated humiliation. One of them threw a vicious side kick at me, trying to hit my solar plexus and kick me out of the tent, and the successive high whip kicks snapped on my left arm, which was blocking and protecting my head, shocking and numbing my scalp. I saw, the right time, an arrow step into his open, left hand grab that swift attack on my leg, right fist too. His chin hard uppercut over. His body was knocked away, heavily smashed on the iron frame, mouth and nose blood flow. The other one, annoyed at the sight, hissed and rose into the air, kicking me straight in the face. I sidestepped the kick in a smooth motion, dodging the kick, and pulled my right hand through his crotch, grabbing him dead center, and using my shoulder to lend strength and force, I threw him out of the tent. There was a loud thud, dust rose from the ground, and his back rammed into the ground. At that moment, I was annoyed to the limit, and with years of shame and resentment, I flew up and jumped, jutting my knee out in midair and knocking it hard into his chest. My face was instantly infested with the blood he spewed out, and I swung my fists left and right, smashing his cheeks dead center. By this time, the other soldiers had rushed over, hastily yanking me away to prevent him from being killed alive by me. I shook off the 7 hands and feet that bound me and walked back to the tent. Pulling over the frightened woman, I spread her legs and shoved my bottom into her again. I fucked her hard, craning my neck to glare at the mercenaries who stood outside the tent and watched the blood that stained my face sliding down and dripping onto the pale C***K of the woman beneath me. The woman covered her face with her hands, not daring to look at me, her mouth whimpering and chanting. At that moment, I did not have the pleasure of sexual desire. Anger and fear still occupied the whole body. I was desperately trying to show my ferocious and murderous nature, but was seeking a kind of safety for survival. The instructor came over with his pistol, and I didn't look at him, still making love hard to the woman under my body. I prepared myself for the strong possibility that he would shoot me in the head and kill me to quell the chaos. After a while, the instructor didn't do that. He examined the 2 mercenaries who had fallen to the ground, and out of the corner of my eye I saw a grim smile spread across his face, and with a wave and a gesture to carry the wounded away, he put his pistol back on his belt and turned to leave. I later learned that the guy who fell out of the tent was killed by me, and the other, severely concussed and in a near vegetative state, was secretly dragged to the back of the mountain and shot. After that, I pressed women to vent in my tent again. Not a single mercenary ever came in, and even on weekdays, there were suddenly a lot fewer people to talk to. Until one night, while I was asleep, I was hooded by a group of men, loaded into a car, and left the training camp. After receiving a month of secret office conversations, I began to carry out sniping agent missions and rarely participated in battlefield combat. The concept of *** in those days was as unimaginable as a bullet, and I was on the verge of death all day long, never imagining that I would be stranded on a deserted island like this, or that I would be hugging Sarit, my infantile fiancée, at this very moment. Sarit's murmur repeated the words, "I want to give it to you. I want to give it to you." With a splash of water, I stood up naked, picked up Sarit, and laid her gently on the rock where Miu had bathed. Dull, sharp breaths kept rushing out of my nose and mouth as I greedily kissed her warm tongue. My hands kept roaming over her body, rough palms rubbing eagerly over those white, jade-like thighs. And C***K. The manhood underneath her was like a wild horse out of control, galloping and jiggling toward her moist, warm fuzz. And like an eel scalded by a cigarette in soft mud, it bore down hard. I could visibly feel the sticky liquid melting and sliding out of that mysterious slit, and if I just contracted my belly a little more, or pushed down on my ass a little harder, the quivering, anxious eel would burrow and squeeze endlessly, and Sarit would go from being a teenage girl to a woman with a yelp of pain. Suddenly, as if my brain was electrocuted, a wave of extreme grief rushed over me, and I violently flipped away from her body and lay down in the stream. The stream was still rushing forward, and no one but myself knew that tears were caught in it. Sarit was startled by my action, and I stood up from the stream, shaking my wet hair from side to side as the water beaded on her naked body. "What's wrong with you?" I didn't answer, whispering, "It's all to live for. Go back to the cave." Picking up Sarit's clothes and handing them to her to put on, my mind goes blank. "You remembered the woman in the tailor's store, didn't you?" she asks tentatively. I rubbed her head and told her. She was a good woman. Sarit hugs me tightly around the waist again and says with tears in her eyes, "Everyone in the town died for her." She pauses and continues, "After she knew you were going to marry me, she made a beautiful dress and gave it to me secretly and told me how to get used to your body and told me not to hate her." Listening to Sarit talk, my memory floats back to the smile of the woman from the tailor store, her moving body that gave and catered to me so selflessly every time. And I failed to protect her, the woman I had slept with so many times. Tell me how she died. I asked Sarit sorrowfully. I don't want you to know, you'll be sad. Sarit's mouth squeezes over my chest in a slur. I want her to tell, don't be afraid that I'll be sad. She thinks for a moment and finally speaks. She was tied up in your loft by those bad guys and tortured all night. Poe and I hid in the secret room under the bed and listened to her scream all night, and in the end she was burned down along with the loft. After hearing this, I held Sarit tightly in my arms and raised my head, looking up at the endless night sky as 2 lines of tears rustled and slipped into my ears. Sarit, thank you. Thank you for not being hurt by bad people. Sarit didn't say anything. Maybe she didn't understand. You go back to the cave and rest. I want to sit alone for a while. Sarit pushed me out of her arms and turned around and headed for the cave entrance. Seeing her go into the cave, I could no longer restrain myself and lay down on the rock where I had been a moment before, and with my hands over my face, burst into resounding sobs. The flesh of my heart twisted and wrung together with all its might, and no matter how great the pain, I had endured it. But this great grief came so suddenly that I could not resist it. I thought of revenge, but the lifting of hatred cannot return her life and my current situation, as if in a prison island. Whether I can live in the long run is unknown. How can I talk about revenge? The good women in my life gone will never come back, since I can't take back the life of my beloved women, only to do my best to protect their lives not to be taken away. Back at the cave, Sarit and Poe were both asleep, and Miyu was still sitting on the rubber raft, branch in one hand, chasing mosquitoes away from the sleeping baby. Her gentle eyes shone with an intoxicating gaze, and seeing me standing naked by the fire, she gazed up at me intently. I did not speak, and remained motionless where I stood. Her charming breasts were open under her white neck, and the shadows of the firelight leaped over them, as if entangled with the show. She smiled lightly and waved to me. Miyu wanted me to carry her to bathe in the stream. I approached her gently, wrapped my left hand around her back, and dug my right hand under her white and pink knees. I was about to pick her up with force, but she didn't cooperate and stopped me instead. Miyu's eyes were big and bright, and her sexy eyelashes fluttered in front of my face. Admiring her so close up made me press my heart was pounding. Her heart also felt my heartbeat and couldn't help but follow along. A pair of jade hands stroked my cheeks, moving my face closer to hers, our noses next to each other. That mature beauty, woman's unique body scent impacted my breath. My bottom instantly popped up, blocked by Miyu's snow-white thighs, unable to continue to push up, a blood-filled pressure angled and stuck in that. Chapter 24. The Grace and Love of a Pretty Woman. Miyu is a woman with a sensitive body. She became a wife long ago. She naturally grasped quite a lot of things between men and women. In the dim light of the fire, she vaguely saw a huge object protruding between my legs. Her delicate thighs intentionally wiggled a little bit. I don't know if it was her intention to rub against me, or she wanted to feel me. I hurriedly leaned back so that the guy in my crotch, who had gotten excited in an inopportune manner, couldn't touch her seductive thighs. Seeing me make such a move, Miyu curved the corners of her mouth and didn't make a sound, but laughed even harder. Those warm and soft jade-like hands clamped down hard on my cheeks again, tugged me to the tip of her nose, gently rubbed it, kissed me vigorously on my forehead, and then pointed a finger at her lower body. Miyu was trying to tell me that she hadn't yet recuperated down there, that she couldn't give it to me there yet, and that the reason she hadn't kissed my mouth or bitten my lips was because she was afraid of irritating me hard, and herself hard. The baby sleeps sweetly, thin eyelids, slightly upturned little mouth, very cute. I used my thumb to gently rub the little one's forehead. He felt itchy and stuck out his young tongue, adding his lips to continue to sleep. Suddenly, the right side of my face was kissed by Miyu, not too light and not too heavy. The moment her delicate lips stuck to my face, a cozy feeling surged to my heart. Miyu saw me twisting my face to look at her moving eyes, blushing and lowering her head. Her cheeks flushed red. My waist powered up and I prepared to pick her up for the second time, struggling a bit to do so, out of fear that my lower parts, which were still in a state of extreme engorgement, would rub against her skin. Miyu smiled sheepishly when she saw me holding her like that and voluntarily owed herself to me, lunging into the crook of my arm. Her pink arms wrapped hard around my neck and pressed her forehead against my right cheek. Her plump breasts sixed through the sheepskin kanji, like two full water balloons, rolling back and forth, bumping and squeezing my chest. I'm not sure if it's a good idea, but I'm not sure if it's a good idea. So I'm not sure if it's a good idea, but I'm not sure if it's a good idea. After cleaning her legs, I cleaned Miyu's buttocks. I took her soft jade feet, signaling her to support her knees, and then grasped the sides of her thighs, slowly dragging downward, trying to make her buttocks close to the stream, dipping my wet palms and continuing to scrub for her elastic white, tender buttocks. Another I can hardly feel the bones inside. Miyu, 2 stocks in the middle of the private place, is afraid of water, can only use my fingers to carefully scrub the 2 sides, the meat bulging soft. Another my fingers hesitate to forget to move. Under the long, thin, thick hair, the row of soft flesh that curved and slid all the way down to the vertebrae was uneven, so I scrubbed her carefully with my fingers. She was always twitching and ahhing, non-painful and half-moaning. The moonlight was soft tonight, also because there was no wind. As I cleaned Miyu's private parts, the smell of damp, sultry piss hit my face. She sat in the hole all day, unable to move, less ventilation, coupled with the inability to wipe and clean after peeing, the plump tender flesh of the lower body for a long time. Squeezed together, the rise of the smell there is very heavy. Sarit's private parts also have a faint odor of urine, which emanates intermittently and retains the rawness of a young girl. Miyu is with a rich sexual history, and her private parts have experienced many friction, the color of the edges of the slit, the very precipitation of years of lust, and so the scent emanating from it, fuller of the ripe taste of nurturing life than Sarit, was so seductive that it made me dizzy. The taste of her sweet milk appeared again in my memory, the fishy sweet smell that feeds and seduces men. I squatted in the stream, the flowing stream constantly hitting my crotch, coupled with the lure of the ripe beauty's body and the sensual impact of close proximity. The bottom became like an eel again, hotly slanting out of the water, the tip full of tension. Miyu giggled out loud when she saw that I finished washing her buttocks but stayed frozen, making me realize that it was time to turn her head and wash her hair and upper body. Taking off the kanji she was wearing and helping her to lie down slowly, Miyu washed her long hair with her own hands while I cupped the stream water and poured it over her soft and plump, scrubbing it more carefully. Miyu's arm that scratches and washes her hair keeps stopping, shaking and panting all over, so I have to pause for a while, wait for her to regain her senses, and then continue washing, and so on, and so forth. As my rough palms scratched and squeezed her plump breasts, I could clearly feel them filling with nursing milk. After a while, Miyu let go of her hand that was scrubbing her hair, and I was just about to turn her around in my arms when the stubborn dick in my crotch that had been out of control, without any warning, was in her grip. The soft hand did not make much force, but the gender magnetic field between men and women, but as a kind of electricity, so that my spinal nerves stimulated a moment, the abdomen violently sucked in the tightening, and that the blood swelling of the big guy mistakenly believed that Miyu's soft palm is the door of the female to the ultimate pleasure, uncontrollably upward jerked a bit. Miyu other hand cover up the handsome mouth. Yin Yin laughed up. I was naked holding Miyu. Miyu was naked being held by me, standing in the moonlight on this island no one knows about. The darkness was the only thing that saw the black eyes underneath me, that Miyu was gripping and refusing to let go of. All around the quiet, Only the babbling brook and shrubs and the chirping insects did not sleep. Miyu, every day to sit in the cave to recuperate, to the evening is not eager to sleep. I was tired and wanted to go to bed early, but by Miyu moving charming, full of temptation body, attracted the thoughts stirring. Put Miyu lightly on the rock, wait for her body to dry some, then put on the sheepskin shoulder back to the cave to rest. Miyu hold my lower hand, still refused to let go. I fascination look at me. I pulled out both hands, would like to observe the body, but the crotch by her tightly gripped hand, pulling unable to stand up, the other eye more and more can't control its swelling and shrugged up. Miyu in the bright moonlight, a pair of love-like water eyes, a moment not to relax and stared at me. Suddenly, she arched her back and extended her other arm, raising it high in the air in a desperate need for me to come closer and hold her. Thought she was going back to the cave, unexpectedly. Violently hooked my neck to her soft body pressure. I obediently by her soul-stirring ice skin and jade bones captured the past. Sturdy chest, heavy pressure on her soft forehead, such as floating in the vastness of the sea in general. She lifted her neck and kissed me on the mouth at once, her tongue shoveling to the base of my tongue, sucking and wrapping the saliva there, and my breath immediately became ragged and sharp as my right hand placed itself on one of her lactating C***K, pushing and squeezing and rubbing it. Her petulant moans, which could drive a man wild with arousal, emanated from her nostrils and eagerly breathing throat, burrowing into my ears and driving me wild with desire. Miyu's warm jade-like arms firmly wrapped around my back, claiming the lust of love from the male body and instilling it into her mature female chest. Suddenly, there was a sharp pain in my back. Miyu's fingers grasped a deeper wound, and I jerked violently. She hastily loosened her tight grip on my crotch and cupped my face, her nervous, watery eyes gazing at me with concern. The pain passed, and I regained the hard look on my face. She asked me to turn around and show her my back, and in the white moonlight, Miyu got a good look at my scarred spine and suddenly wrapped her arms around my back and pressed her face against it. I felt the hot tears she was shedding, sliding down my back, and the tickling sensation hit me as the warm tongue added to the area around the wound. Miyu sits up and motions for me to lie down next to her. Maybe she wanted to lay on my chest to give me some comfort or to get the solace that a woman is supposed to have. I didn't refuse Miyu and slowly lay down as she stroked one hand from my chest to the small of my back before gently crouching her petite body down on my belly as if she wanted to cave in and listen to my battered body. She whimpered and cried. It was so sad. It was the first time she cried in pain since she came to the island, just like I just did. There was a part of her tears that was sad for me, and a part that was sad for herself. Miyu must miss the father of her children and miss her family. I looked at the bright moon in the night sky and imagined what it would be like to stand in the town attic and look at it, whether I was seeing the same moon. My span has long been paralyzed. Back to normal? Miyu gradually stopped crying, but another thing I did not expect, her peach-sweet little mouth swallowed into my bottom, which was active like an eel just a moment ago. Wet and silky saliva, slightly hot mouth, by that like an eel head-like part, greedy feeling, began to stir again. No. I instantly sat up and told her in English not to do that. It was as if she didn't hear me, but she lathered up even harder. I swept Miyu into my arms and held her head tightly, rubbing my chin in her soft hair. She must not be allowed to do that, even though she is doing it out of gratitude and love for me. Whether in body or in mind, Miyu is still a wounded woman, and what she needs most at this moment is a man's help and love. It is the duty of men to protect women, just as the two predators in the gully today helped the giant crocodile to tear down the giant bear. It was also out of a kindred instinct, so that even if they ended up dead, each other's souls would be able to comfort each other. On their way to heaven, I had to go and get enough food to keep everyone alive and give them a peaceful and comfortable environment to live in, instead of herding them into caves as soon as it got dark and depriving them of the freedom to frolic under the night sky and enjoy the nightlife on the grounds of protecting life. Moreover, the easy release of the essence in the male body would weaken my fighting spirit, and good fortifications must not be taken lightly until they are established, and really, to lose any of them would be to let down the beloved women, living and dead, and make my life a failure. Chapter 25. Brace Meat in the Snake Forest. The night air was getting a little cooler, so I helped Miyu put on her sheepskin kangaroo and carried her back to the cave and set her down on that rubber raft. To keep the temperature a little warmer and everyone comfortable sleeping, some more wood was added to the fire. Po didn't ask me to carry her to bed tonight. It must have been something Sarit said to her that made her lay down nicely on the bearskin and go to bed early, looking forward to going out with me tomorrow too. Carry food. Coming to them both, I gently squeezed down, and once I was next to the soft bearskin, I felt exhausted before closing my eyes and quickly falling into sleep. The wooden door of the cave was made secure by boulders and indie hemp vines, and there was no longer any need to worry about the threat of the giant bear. And with the delicious crocodile meat digested in everyone's stomachs, the problem of crowding the trio was solved, as if that bear's skin were fetched again tomorrow. Another sleeping place could be spread out. Po and Sarit got up early, and when a fluffy dog's tail grass tickled my neck and face, only then did I get confused and smelled the smell of grilled alligator and opened my eyes to see Po with big, adorable eyes crouching in front of my head, a mischievous grin lifting up on his face. Sarit made all 4 breakfasts and smiled at me when she saw me waking up, a sunny good morning of sorts. Miyu was holding the baby and breastfeeding it. I stepped out of the cave and washed the remnants of my sleep in the stream. I looked at the sun in the sky and realized that I had gotten up late. I was concerned about the meat of the beast in the stream gully being eaten by something else, and chewed quickly as I ate the grilled fillets, saying as I ate, Sarit and Po, after they have eaten their fill and re-yard the rock barriers of the trout pit pools that hold the trout in captivity in front of the cave, will have to be restocked with fresh food. I am going to cut down some small trees and manufacture 3 wooden sleds, large and small, to load back the fresh meat from the creek gully. Po chews on a slice of barbecue with relish, shakes the doggy and snaps, "No, mine's going to be as big as Sarit's." Sarit snorted a laugh and said, "Can you pull it? The food is heavy." "Yes, just pack less." Her little mouth curled up high and Sarit and I both laughed. The sun was already hanging halfway up in the sky and, following the same method as last time, I folded down a lot of trees, not too many of which were needed this time, and didn't take too much time. By the time I was done with the 3 rough wooden sleds I was using to haul the meat, Sarit and Po had finished yarding the pit ponds, which had reverted to the shape they had been in before they were destroyed by the wild bears. I told them to hurry up, so they wouldn't wait until we got to the creek gully, and all that was left down there was a pile of animal bones, and it would be a waste of time. This time I took Po on the road to carry back more food, and it was inevitable that she would be allowed to follow the adventure in order to survive. She was dragging the small wooden sled, which was suitable for her strength, ahead of Sarit, and I was pulling the largest wooden sled, ahead of Po. Sarit and I walked through these woods twice, and Po was the only one who showed any nervousness when I picked off the poisonous snakes that got in the way with my wooden pole. The formation in the woods was specially prescribed by me. Sarit held a pistol and could shoot to defend himself at the critical moment when the beasts attacked. Po was the youngest and the most timid, so I let her follow in the middle, so that she could be protected in time in case of danger. The forest gun is still hanging on my back. When I left the cave, left Miyu 2 pistols, and the cave door is pressed tightly, just in case. I told the 2 of them to adjust their minds, and estimated that those beasts' meat would have to be carried twice, trying to do it before nightfall. Both of them nodded firmly and followed me to trot forward. Along the way, we all try to keep silent, to minimize the noise, every time beside me. Startled flying birds, or scurrying out of the fancy colors, strange-shaped small beasts, Po were scared to death, hurriedly grabbed the waist of my pants, hide behind. Perhaps with Po as the youngest girl, Sarit was stronger than ever. We continued through the woods, and along the way, I kept scouting around, checking behind Sarit at times. Bringing two girls out with me would be a serious loss in case of danger, so from the moment we entered the woods, I raised my vigilance to combat status. Sarit and Po were sweating profusely as they ran behind me, their pretty faces flushed and their tops and pants soaked. I was sweating likewise, my bare back dripping and beads of water running down my face. I don't know if it was the dew from the branches and leaves of the short trees, or my own hot sweat. I untied the hemp vines I was going to use to tie up the beast's meat and strung up 3 wooden sleds, making myself the front end and the main output of power so that Po and Sarit could have an easier time of it. However, when we encountered a big danger, we had to drop the 3 wooden sleds at the same time, and there was no way to save our lives and lose money. Gradually, we could hear the sound of a gurgling stream ahead of us, and we accelerated our running pace, hoping to break out of the woods early and enter the bright stream. Stop, I dropped the sled to the ground immediately, afraid of tripping Po behind me, but the hasty stop still caused Po to lose his balance and hit his head on my back, almost falling over. His big eyes panicked and, looking around, Sarit stumbled a little and crouched down hastily without speaking. She knew that by my sudden cry I was sensing danger. "I'm afraid of bears," said Po, and her slender arms tightened around my waist. I immediately signaled the two of them to keep quiet and all crouched down on the ground. The cold hairs on my body stood upright, especially on my calves, like spikes had exploded, and my stomach began to churn, wanting to vomit. I had been bitten by an anaconda during a previous jungle battle, while cloaked in camouflage on a sniper mission. A specially trained British sniper infiltrated the territory. The other 5 members of the team were all shot by him remotely in a very short period of time, and in the end it was just a showdown between me and him, both of us wanting to shoot each other to make our own lives come alive. In the dense jungle, he and I were running parallel to each other 100 meters apart while rushing forward at the same time. And every time the British sniper leaped over a horizontal log or a large, coiled tree root, he would fling his shot in midair and fire the bullet at me. It was the first time I had seen such an excellent sniper who could actually sight through the sniper's scope and aim and shoot in the moment of air control, truly a ghost of the battlefield of extreme terror. In the course of his rapid flight, he fired 2 bullets. The first grazed the back of my neck, the second grazed my chin. I couldn't return the favor as he did, and as I sprinted I kept changing speeds to prevent being killed by his estimation of intersections. As I ran, I drew my pistol and kept firing point blank at him, destroying the feel of his shot, which would surely have hit me in the head or neck if this horrible fellow had fired a third shot. For an enemy who is also a sniper, running is not about escaping, but looking for a chance to kill your opponent. Even the most powerful sniper has the possibility of losing his life when he is unlucky. He didn't see that there was a ditch covered with dark green floating weeds across the front, and if I didn't familiarize myself with the surroundings, I would have fallen into it just like him. This British sniper must have secretly parachuted down at night not long ago, unaware of the ecology and terrain of this area. The most deceptive is this ditch. It was as if there was a layer of bran floating on top of the water tank, and a greedy mouse would be trapped alive in it if it jumped on it. At the moment he fell into the water with a plop, I jumped up, scampered up to a large tree with lush foliage, quickly hid behind a cluster of thick branches and leaves, aimed at the location where he fell into the water, set up a sniper position, as long as he swam, immediately shoot him in the head. However, this was an extremely experienced and devious master of combat, and from the time he plunged into the water, he was slow to move. The gutter, though deep, was not so deep as to drown him. I thought he must be camouflaged somewhere, looking for a chance to shoot me. I was hiding in the tree. He was camouflaged underwater, and it was difficult, yet simple, to kill each other at this point. As long as I move a little in the tree, or he moves a little in the water, both will be killed in an instant. Therefore, before killing the opponent, no one dares to make half a movement. Patience is life. Even in the darkness of the night, it is still possible to shoot the first shot with the hazy moonlight so that the opponent has the highest probability of dying. It was a stalemate until the morning of the third day, when the sun was very harsh and I had some advantage in shooting from the heights, but my eyes were simmering and swollen and hurting badly, and I was giving the mosquitoes very bad bites in many places on my body. It was the price to be paid for living. Hunger and thirst made my brain dizzy for a while, and as soon as I closed my eyes, I would quickly faint, fall out of the tree, and in the very air of the fall, my body would be pierced by the bullets, and there would be no chance of feeling the pain of a heavy fall. The sniper in the water, immersed motionless for 3 days, and the creatures in the water, drilling and biting him, was equally well off. Both endured to the point of wanting to shake hands and make peace, but that cannot be. This situation is doomed to 2 ways to die, either by the other side of the chute to death, or consume death. With bloodshot eyes, I peered through the sniper's scope at the patch of water, never able to discern anything unusual. At this time a dragonfly landed on the top of a thin section of water. Plants, it a moment to drop up, a moment to fly up, and this plant tangled. At first I did not think, but suddenly thought of a possibility. Underwater camouflage snipers certainly need a straw to breathe. The top of the green water plants must be breathing, so the dragonfly was blown up and down, tossing endless. I looked more closely at the watercress and realized that it was surprisingly vertical and not like the watercress next to it, which swayed and swayed along with the undercurrent underneath. The body was already overdrawn to its limit in the tree, and there was only one more thing to do, to gamble with him on life and death. Through that special underwater breathing tube, I visualized his position and posture in the water, gauged the approximate location of the head, aimed at that range, and fired 3 shots left and right in quick succession. As the bullets crashed through the thick flotsam on the surface of the water, I could see the reddish water ripples that flooded the surface. I won the bet on this one and shot my opponent. Holding on to the big tree and sliding down, I lay down on the high post again and watched him for a while, seeing the back of his head and back bulge out of the water. Approaching over, I grabbed him by the hair and yanked him to shore. It turned out that he had hidden the sniper scope under a large round leaf of an aquatic plant, and the dark barrel had been pointed at the tree 100 meters away, waiting for me to be exposed. For snipers, putting the muzzle on the enemy's chest and shooting 1,000 meters away from each other doesn't make much difference. The target in the sniper's scope is as good as standing right in front of you. Luckily, there was another big tree in front of the one I was hiding in, and the stacked branches protected me well.